Hi there. Welcome to the From Lab to Launch podcast by Qualio, where we share inspiring stories from the people on the front lines of life sciences. Tune in and leave inspired to bring your life-saving products to the world.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the show today. I'm Kelly from Qualio, and I'm your host here at From Lab to Launch. If you haven't already, please subscribe and give us a review on Apple or Spotify. We'd appreciate that. And if you want to be on the show, please see the application linked in the show notes. We've had a lot of people reach out, and we absolutely love connecting with you. Today's guest is Dinesh Kabaleeswaran, who is the Senior Director of Insights and Advisory at Managed Markets, Insight and Technology, or MMIT for short. Dinesh's team provides market access context and a market research narrative for MMIT's data and technology products. Dinesh has more than 7 years of managed care experience, advising large biopharmaceutical clients on pre- and post-launch strategies across oncology, non-oncology, and immunology therapeutic areas. Dinesh holds a master's in bioengineering from the University of Pennsylvania. The people at MMIT believe that patients who need life-saving treatments shouldn't face delays because accessing drugs can be confusing. As the leading provider of market access data, analytics, and insights, their expert teams of clinicians, data specialists, and market researchers provide clarity and confidence to help their customers make better decisions. They are the trusted go-to-market partner for more than 1,300 biopharma and payer customers. Today, we'll get into market access strategy and how it can be a major differentiator. So for you, Dinesh, welcome. Can you give us a quick overview of what you and your team are up to at MMIT?
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for the great introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this podcast and to be speaking with you. And Managed Markets, Insight and Technology is a trusted go-to partner for several pharmaceutical manufacturers in ensuring that they receive and act upon market access data. We are focused on data, technology, and insights around market access. And my team's mission, as is MMIT's mission, is to ensure that we smooth access to therapies from pipeline to prescription by providing and producing actionable insights for pharmaceutical manufacturers to go out there and take action based on the market access data that they receive.
Nice. How do companies typically approach their market access strategy post-launch?
It's a really good question, and it really depends upon a variety of different factors, and it's going to change based on the therapeutic area that you operate in. An oncology manufacturer would have a very different strategy, go-to-market post-launch, from a rare disease manufacturer, who would again have a very different plan of action from a manufacturer who's been working in immunology for several years. And now you have a slew of biosimilars that are launching, and those strategies are very different. So it really depends upon the therapeutic area that you're operating in, and that would influence the dynamics based on the competition in the therapeutic area. For example, let's say that you're the 19th drug to launch in rheumatoid arthritis. Now that's a very different plan of action and expectation setting that an immunology manufacturer would have from someone else who's launching probably the first therapy in a completely new therapeutic area where there's a huge unmet need. And payers react very differently based on therapeutic area too. Payers have much more open access in oncology and in rare diseases than in a highly competitive category such as rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis or psoriatic arthritis. So all of these factors will really influence how a manufacturer would go to these payers post-launch right after an FDA approval.
Interesting. Are there things you see them doing from that strategic perspective that you think they should consider doing differently?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're seeing evolve in the market access space is how early manufacturers actually have this conversation with payers. And most of the biopharmaceutical manufacturers and early biostage tech companies are really, really good at having these conversations post-launch and a few months prior to launch. But where the industry is leading us towards is having these conversations much earlier in the pipeline planning process. And some of these conversations now tend to happen even in phase 1 and phase 2. And that's fantastic, because that just opens up a lot of opportunities for all forms of stakeholders in the value proposition chain. That's right from payers to physicians to clinical trial experts to manufacturers, and ultimately to patients. And that is something that we are seeing change. And we would really like to influence that change in a positive direction over the course of the next few years.
I've worked in both device and drug development in my career, and it's an area that medical device, I think, actually does a better job of considering. In the design control process, very early on, we talk about reimbursement and what's our strategy to get paid. And it's amazing to me that a drug can get all the way into the market and nobody has talked about what happens, how do we get paid. That's great. I love wow. I really love to hear that you guys are focusing on that, because I think it's something that the pharma and biotech industries could do better than they do now. Well, and I think kind of opens up the next question a little bit there. Life sciences as an industry is becoming increasingly competitive. Why should companies introduce market access strategy earlier in the commercialization process?
Of course, Kelly, and I think it's a really good point that you made as well in terms of some of the trends that we've seen in the medical devices and what drugs and therapies could learn from their counterparts in medical devices. Because the world has really changed in the last 5 to 6 years, and I never get tired of telling the story. But in 2015 and 2016, when there were life-changing hepatitis C drugs that were launched in the market, prior to that particular inflection point, a lot of the biopharmaceutical manufacturers would take access for granted. And when you think about that, I mean, when you're launching a high-cost therapy that's solving for a huge unmet need in the industry, naturally, you would expect your therapy to be covered. And that's what used to happen. And most of these drugs, when they launched in the market, they would be covered through a new drug launch policy that would say that, hey, you're launching this market, all you need is to fill out this form, or you would be covered without a prior authorization, because ultimately you're going to get cured and there's going to be a reduction in downstream hospitalization costs. But what's really changed since that launch in 2015 and 2016 was that it really impacted the budget impact models for a lot of payers. And they were like, hey, wait, let's take a step back and let's think about this, and let's not approve drugs to be reimbursed or covered immediately after launch. And what they did was very interesting, because the landscape completely shifted post 2016 and 17. They started imposing much more restrictive interim policies. Now, these are not final prior authorization policies that would ensure coverage for the drug, but they imposed interim policies. And their intention was not really to deny coverage per se, but rather to delay coverage so that they can buy time and ensure that it take into account their budget impact models and work and provide access for these therapies ultimately based on a certain set of restrictions or parameters. And now we are at a position where manufacturers have to react to it. So manufacturers have to stay on top of it. And now they need to have these conversations much more earlier in the process in order to ensure that these drugs are getting covered right after launch within the first 3 months or the 6 months or the 9 months. And that is something that's a key change that we've seen in the last few years. More importantly, Kelly, and I think this is why it's really important to have these conversations early in the pipeline planning process, is not only to ensure that your drug gets reimbursed or covered, because that's always the $1 million question with payers, right? You would always want to make sure that your drug gets covered and reimbursed. But more and more, payers are having a decision in ensuring how clinical trials are being even designed. A payer would expect to say that if you meet this particular OS rate, and OS for overall survival rate, or let's say a progression-free survival rate, and that's when we would cover your drug on top of these 5 other therapies in the market. And that kind of feedback from a payer or from a physician or from anyone else in the stakeholder group becomes very influential in designing those clinical trials so that those endpoints are met. And ultimately, these drugs are covered, reimbursed, and patients get access to therapies. And that's why it becomes very imperative that market access stakeholder group is a part of the pipeline planning process at every single stage in the whole value prop chain.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, lots of experience in that space with getting partway through trials and then having additional questions answered that we didn't consider. And given the number of drugs that drop out in that phase 2 space and never see the light of day, that could be a part of the influence, I think, to help solve some of those pipeline problems too. So tell us a little more about recent patient access analytics launch. We'll link to the press release in the show notes, but give us your version of the story.
Oh, it's a game changer. That's my four-word response to patient access analytics. It's the holy trinity of the healthcare system, right? You really need to make sure that you have access to your claims information, you have access to your access data, and how do you bridge that together? And Penal and none better than Penalgo's platform, patient access analytics, to help bring those data sets together, because now you're not only solving for those access questions, but it also tying it with respect to claims data and answering and providing responses instantaneously, saving loads of time for a lot of the pharmaceutical manufacturers. I'm really excited and thrilled that this is in the market, and I can't wait to see how it's going to change the game for a lot of biopharmaceutical manufacturers.
That's awesome. Are you guys measuring some of the, keeping an eye on those trends from a before and after perspective? Are we be able to pull some measurable insights, you think, from the, hey, if you would put this data in, your trial will go faster, smoother, better?
Yes, of course, and I think the beauty of patient access analytics is not just in solving for a particular use case with a clinical trial, or a particular use case with respect to bringing together access and claims data, but really solving for a variety of different use cases. And we're starting to have conversations with a lot of pharmaceutical manufacturers who express and anticipate a lot of promise from the patient access analytics platform. And very soon, I'm sure we're going to start tracking a lot of the impact, the tangible impact that it's going to create for pharmaceutical manufacturers. Because hey, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all about impact. And when you think about impact, you can measure it through a number of different ways. But I think with patient access, the key word is the impact is tangible and can be measured, and ultimately creates a positive influence in the industry, solving for answers almost instantaneously.
Definitely. I can see it affecting valuation as well in some of the startups.
Yep.
And I'm sure there are ways to get at such things, and probably, at least in my experience, I've seen some interesting sort of creative ways to get at some of that valuation. But to have this real data to drive some of that, I feel like that's you're right. That's a game changer for sure. That's exciting.
Yes, it is. And I think MMIT is a very exciting phase in its evolution as it unites with Penalgo, the Tedem Group, and the Evaluate business, because now we are not only solving for questions from manufacturers, but also solving for questions from financial firms, from evaluation companies, from investors, and we are not only operating at a particular phase in the pipeline process, but we really go from pipeline to prescription now, and that really opens up opportunity to learn more from the market, not just from a particular stakeholder group, and also to provide more positive change to across all these different.
Nice. So on your website, I noticed you've got MMIT Reality Check series. Lots of great insights there. We're also going to provide that link in the show notes. What are some interesting trends you're seeing in healthcare that you guys are speaking to in the Insights series?
Yes, of course, and MMIT's Reality Check series, and MMIT also recently launched its thought leadership program, where we provide where we cover a lot of different trends from different parts of the industry. Well, in 2022, the landscape is continuously evolving, and 2022 is going to be an exciting year for healthcare for a couple of reasons. And number one is the launch of a lot of different high-cost therapies in the market. And when you have all these high-cost therapies in the market, payers are going to react, and whether the reaction is going to be positive, challenging, or neutral is going to be something that's going to be interesting for us to monitor. And with the launch of all these different high-cost therapies, whether it is in oncology, whether it is in genetics, it's going to change the payers operate, not only in 2022 but also into the future. And that's something that's going to be exciting for us to monitor. Number two is the launch of a lot of different biosimilars in the market. And we saw several different biosimilars launch in oncology. expecting immunology biosimilars to launch, and that's going to set a series of trends that we're all going to learn from in 2022. And that's really exciting for a lot of us. The other key trend is really the evolution of a lot of different copay accumulator programs and patient assistance programs, and some of which are really evolving to dig deeper into the pockets of pharmaceutical manufacturers and pockets of patients, and thereby eating into the costs of these specific stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem. And that's just something that's going to evolve. And I see it becoming more and more restrictive over time. And that's also going to be interesting to monitor. So 2022 overall, I think we're also seeing a lot of digital therapeutics and genetics, and those are very interesting spaces to operate in. And it's interesting because everyone has a view. And if you look at it overall, no view is really consistent from one person to another. And that's going to be interesting for us to evaluate and assess and see how this space evolves. So together, these are some of the 3 or 4 trends that I'm particularly interested and excited about, and added to the fact that we have all of these market research solutions that solve for these issues day in and day out, just makes it a very proud moment for us to really operate in 2020.
It's exciting. All right. On a more personal note, if you could go back and tell yourself something at the start of your career, what would that be?
It's an interesting question, and I think one of the as we look at the next 10 years, I really strongly feel that the key to success in healthcare, and this may be applied in a different, is interdisciplinary knowledge, and that is something that I'm looking to cultivate over every single time and every single conversation. And that's why I'm a big fan of these podcasts, Kelly, because you have so much diversity in each of the conversations that you have with different guests that you invite. And the reason for the importance of interdisciplinary knowledge is just going to be the application that of all these different skills in your day-to-day learnings. For example, I would have never thought that 8 years back when I first joined Managed Markets Insight and Technology, or 7 years back when I first joined the organization, that payers are going to have a big say in clinical trials. And clinical trials is not your point of focus as a function or as a study material for you. And now it's really important for you to know all about clinical trials and all about how payers are. 8 years back, I would have never thought that my research in neuroscience models will come in handy as I prepare models of analogs and forecasts, but now I understand that there is a lot of importance that goes into application of mathematical modeling from neuroscience into an analog or a forecast that you prepare for a drug that's about to launch. So if I had to go back in time, and I would reiterate with myself that the interdisciplinary learning is going to be important, and that's something that you should always look to apply into the future. 10 years from now, when we have this conversation, Kelly, we'll probably be operating in a very different world of healthcare, and we might think that, hey, what are we speaking in 2022? It looks like a conversation from the 1950s. So that's the
Right.
pace at which we are changing and we are evolving, and I think it's really important to keep abreast and run at the same pace.
Yep, totally agree. It's been quite an evolution, time in industry. I was joking with someone I talked to recently that I remember when I first started my career, we were still using carbon copy paper to record all of our lab results.
Right.
and now people are like, carbon copy, what is that? Like, you just don't even asking a kid to dial a rotary phone, right? But man, it does change. And again, the whole learning about clinical trial space and the importance of these kinds of things and having that input into the trial, it's a small world, and it's just getting smaller, it feels. And the more we know, the better decisions we can all make about all of it.
Absolutely.
So where can people go to learn more, follow along, and connect with you?
Of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Dinesh Kabaleeswaran. My last name is a spell check. Kelly, I hope you would provide the right spelling and a byline on your podcast. And you can also learn more about MMIT at mmitnetwork.com and connect with us and engage with us. And we're happy to have a conversation with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dinesh. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of From Lab to Launch, brought to you by Qualio. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and give the show a positive review. It really helps us out. For more information about Qualio, our guest today, or to be a guest on a future episode, please refer to the show notes. Until next time.